We are talking about that breaking news over the weekend where essentially our weaponry is going to be allowed to use to strike Russia. We also know, Will, that this is coming at a time when Vladimir Putin just a few weeks ago made a statement, and he said, if this was obviously talking about that, he said, if this decision is taken, it will mean nothing less than the direct involvement of NATO countries, the United States, and European countries in the war in Ukraine. This will be their direct participation, and this, of course, will significantly change the very essence, the very nature of the conflict. When you have an American people who voted so overwhelmingly for President Trump, for policies, and you can even say for President Trump, for Tulsi Gabbard, for a lot of these people who have strong military backgrounds but have a distinct distaste for the act of war, to escalate this, it's just a moment of chaos. And you even have Secretary Blinken, obviously going out in a few months, Secretary Blinken, he essentially said, Will, in this comment, this press gaggle from just a couple days ago, that they're going to do whatever they can to make sure they would claim it as Ukraine being able to defend itself, but really spend all this money to keep us in this war.
That's right. And we'll play this bite. This was at a NATO summit. So obviously NATO is the big fear of Russia that they've been saying this war is about, not wanting Ukraine to join NATO. Now, critics of that will say, no, they just want to rebuild the old Soviet Union and take Ukraine. But as you mentioned, people voted for President Trump, who has been critical of the policy of Ukraine. I think even if you are a supporter of the Ukrainian cause, because there are many on the right and President Trump voters that still are sympathetic to the Ukrainian cause that don't want direct U.S. involvement. They don't want an escalation like Vladimir Putin says, where all of a sudden it's the U.S. shooting against Russia and vice versa, instead of it just being us sending foreign aid and military aid to the country. But they are so determined to keep this pressure up and their policy at the forefront of this with just 63 days left to go, that not only are they changing their policy and saying, yeah, go ahead and use all these taxpayer-funded weapons that we've sent you and shoot them into Russia. And you know what? You can go ahead and take out North Korean soldiers as well. And here's what Antony Blinken, Secretary of State, said just a couple days ago at this NATO meeting about the funding going to Ukraine here in the end. Bite 6.
As we're working to make sure that Ukraine has what it needs to effectively defend itself, the United States continues to step up. We've obligated just recently and pushed out the door another $8 billion in security assistance for Ukraine. That was in September. Another almost $500 million just a few weeks ago. And President Biden is committed to making sure that every dollar we have at our disposal will be pushed out the door between now and January 20th.
Yeah, so that was obviously from Antony Blinken pretty much just saying, hey, we're going to get as much money as we can to Ukraine because who knows what these Trump people are going to do. Let's go ahead and take a phone call. Let's go to Ronald, who's calling in South Carolina, who's watching on Rumble, one of our favorite free speech platforms. Rumble. Ronald, you're on the air.
Yeah, just commenting on many of the liberals who would literally say that Trump has been a warmonger and they was afraid to let him even have the codes to the launch sites and stuff like that. And now you got Biden literally just ripping through and just indiscriminately just tossing out all these billions of dollars in weapons and such like that to Ukraine and everything. It's shoes on the other foot, and nobody's saying anything about it.
It does feel like, Ronald, it was one of those campaign lies that seemed to keep rearing its ugly head. Look, they've said that about Tulsi Gabbard. Now, Tulsi Gabbard's come on this broadcast every week for the last couple years and has even sometimes disagreed with our positions and our thoughts on war because she is, though active military, has been someone who has been pretty outspoken against the military-industrial complex. However, they're going to label her as a warmonger. They're going to label Donald Trump as a warmonger. But really, we all know the truth. And that's sort of the real sad part about this. Look, I don't think anyone is infallible or is wrong, or I don't necessarily think that war is not an option sometimes. I think sometimes you got to do it. But this idea that President Trump and the Trump administration, that's all they're about, is really bizarre. And it's just factually inaccurate.
Well, and they take that if people on the right are concerned about the way money is being spent, the way that the entire operation and strategy behind it is maybe escalatory instead of de-escalatory, and they try to say that the right are warmongers and are either that or they're cozied up to Putin,
right,
which is not the case. But then you also think about this, where the Department of Defense has just failed its 7th audit in a row. So they go through and they try to say, okay, can you account for all of the military spending? They have one of the largest budgets. It's $800 billion in the U.S. government. And yet they have failed an audit. They have not received a clean audit from a third party for 7 years. And you couple that with the fact that all this aid going to Ukraine, this is just from July. Reuters put this out. The Pentagon has found $2 billion worth of additional errors in its calculations for ammunition, missiles, and other equipment sent to Ukraine, increasing the improperly valued material to a total of $8.2 billion, the U.S. government revealed on Thursday. So what you're seeing here is that they don't have their house in order. This is another reason people voted for President Trump, because of things like DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, that all our taxpayers are just being sent around the world, funding wars, escalating wars, and there's not accountability for where it's even going. There was headlines from the New York Times talking about how much of that military aid was being just taken by corrupt generals in Ukraine.
Just disappearing.
So when Blinken is saying we've just put out $8 billion of security assistance in September, and then $500 million just a few weeks ago, and we're going to make sure every dollar we have at our disposal will be pushed out the door between now and January 20th, this is what people voted against, of saying, we don't care what it is.
We're going to
get that money out there to Ukraine, and it doesn't matter. And then you have what we played last week of AOC talking with Joy Reid on MSNBC, and I think we should play it again. Because when you think about the moves of this administration, when you hear this, it should infuriate you that they're trying to spin it as who the warmongers are.
Yeah, you've been familiar with Tulsi. She's obviously been on our broadcast for years. You've known her for all the time that she's been on here. They were going through on MSNBC, Joy Reid and AOC, going through kind of each person in the new cabinet. And of course, they get to Tulsi Gabbard. And what do they have to say about that? Take a listen.
And we haven't even gotten to Tulsi Gabbard potentially having access to national security information. And Russia loves it, loves her.
And I actually think almost more than Matt Gaetz, Tulsi Gabbard's appointment is devastating. And Tulsi Gabbard's nomination, as much as she says that she's an anti-war person, she's not.
Yeah.
She supports very pro-war individuals,
including
abroad.
in Syria.
And let's be very clear, a Tulsi Gabbard nomination is a pro-war nomination globally. Point blank, period.
As is Donald Trump as president of the United States.
The only president to not start a new war in our lifetime is President Trump. But of course, he is a pro-war president. And yeah, Tulsi Gabbard, go look at her record. She obviously has different feelings. Is actually an active military person. So sure, is she fully 100% no war ever? It's never needed? Of course not. Not getting involved in wars. We don't need to be there. Spending wisely. Spending our troops wisely. Making sure they're not wasted. Making sure they're not sent out to die for nothing.
That's right. And also, one of our colleagues brought up when we were talking about the content of this show, they keep talking about the peaceful transfer of power. And while that is related to handing over the reins of the government, they are actively making an escalation in war, which will lead to a less peaceful time for the United States during this transition period. And I think that while there isn't a ton that can be done as of right now, it shows the importance of why even President Trump is getting people lined up already ahead of being sworn into office of who he's going to nominate to these offices, that they can start hitting the ground running, meeting with senators, being able to explain why they need to be leading these departments so that, one, we can cut government waste. Two, we cannot be meddling and escalating our involvement in foreign wars, which is a mandate, I believe, of the Trump administration, and everything that trickles down from that. When they have spent so much time at trying to reshape the Department of Defense with more liberal policies throughout the past 4 years, but at the same time, also wanting to escalate these wars, but say we don't want boots on the ground, what you end up is with a weaker Department of Defense that has so entangled us in foreign wars that at some point the United States may actually have to be involved in those wars. And the problem is that they've also weakened our stature on the world stage. And that's what we need to turn around as well.